On 11 September, we flew out of Oliver Tambo. We're on our way to Prague, which is in the Czech Republic. So we touched down the next day at around 8:30. The women in this town are beautiful. Miroslav, the local representative from Skyleader, was there to pick us up, and he drove us to Jalovo, where the plane was waiting. After quiet lunch in the local town of Jalovo, we drove out to the airfield, and Radim, the Skyleader test pilot, opened the hangars, and there stood the most beautiful plane I'd ever seen in my whole life. I was excited to have the first flight in this beautiful plane, and we took her up for our first flip together.
So we don't have masters on, mains on, the picture covers there, put the timer down. So on left we've got 24. Actually 110 meters. Isn't the place all looking good?
We then landed, and Dennis jumped out of the plane and fiddled with the tab. Sure enough, she was perfect.
What do you got to work out the Here's your chair, Dennis.
I could have brought more. Is there nothing else we can put in?
Yeah, there's a block. Do you want to bring the big one? A good one, eh?
Cool.
I say.
Well, I hope we're not back in half an hour.
Fueled, packed, and ready to leave. We said our goodbyes to Miroslav, Radim, and the rest of the Skyleader team, and we're off. The ATC came over at one stage and told us we were entering restricted space, and for two private pilots like Dennis and myself, this was quite intimidating.
Okay, we are in the Jalovo area. Take off the mic, taking off for a flight to X. Take off the mic. On this heading, you are proceeding to Austria. You have to cross the boundary of Slovakia according to flight plan. Zu Uniform Tango Alpha Mike from present position proceed direct to Epic. Tango Papa Lima, climb flight level 140 again 45. 26 minutes to that point, we don't have it on our GPS.
Macedonia Airport, Thessaloniki. Not a bad place. The next morning, we were to fly from Thessaloniki to Heraklion on Crete. This was past some beautiful Mediterranean scenery, and the ATC were amazing, as we were only a couple of sport pilots with no commercial experience at all.
Heading 110, continue descend to 3000, and you're cruising altitude. 11.05, thank you very much. It's 2 hours 39 minutes. Uniform Tango Alpha Mike.
On 18 September, we prepared ourselves for the Mediterranean crossing. This needed us to kit ourselves with life jackets, sufficient water if we had to put down, flares, and sat-nav. Our taxi clearances and takeoff was easy enough in Heraklion, and soon enough we were airborne for Egypt.
Equal final runway 20. Final.
This 4.5-hour crossing was quite challenging as 2 hours into the flight we lost the horizon and were reliant totally on our GPS and autopilot.
Tango Alpha Mike, can you make a left turn, not right turn. Make a left turn now.
In order to clear, we needed to land at Alu Aba Asidawa Airport. After takeoff, we were instructed to fly the Egyptian Airways, which we hadn't planned for, and we obviously didn't have enough fuel to do this. So we carried out an emergency landing at Alexandria. Upon landing, we were confronted by army officials and local airport security, who kept us on the ground for 2 days in order to obtain clearance from the army to take off. If you ever consider flying across Egypt, maybe you should think of taking extra fuel because you might be required to fly the airways, extending your trip by possibly double. This was quite a nervy leg as we needed to fly over some very unfriendly desert and an emergency landing would be impossible. The next day we set off for Khartoum. We landed in Khartoum where the temperature was 50 degrees Celsius and couldn't wait to get out of there. The next day we had arranged for 200 litres of fuel and we only needed 100 litres at a cost of $5.50. We left the remaining fuel on the ground for the thieves to help themselves. And after refueling, took off for Lokichokio, which lies north of Kenya. We flew through Sudan and past Ethiopia to the west into Kenya. This was a 7-hour leg. After a good night's rest in Lokichokio, we were on our way to Nairobi. This took us through the Rift Valley and to the west of Mount Kenya and on to Nairobi. This flight took us over the Great Tsavo National Park onto Zanzibar International Airport. It is Sunday morning, 20 to 10. The next leg, to Pemba, which lies at the northern point of Mozambique, took us along the east coast of Africa and some beautiful Indian Ocean scenery below us.
Okay guys, so the relay is Tango Alpha Mike. Okay, we just have on
After a 4.5-hour flight, we stopped over at Pemba to refuel, and the next day we were on to Kilimani. Just as we were cleared for takeoff, we realized that the nosy was stiff. This ended up being a flat tire.
Okay, spare wheel.
Spare wheel. Thank goodness Dennis had insisted on bringing spares, so that within 10 minutes we were airborne. The leg to Beira was less than 2 hours, but 15 minutes into the flight we realized that the starboard fuel cap was loose. And if we had encountered any turbulence, we would have probably lost it. The wind was wedging it in position. The flight to Indigo Bay, which lies 7 nautical miles northeast of Velinculos in Mozambique, was about 1.5 hours. On landing at the airfield, we were welcomed by the local staff, who met us with juices and cold towels to wipe the sweat off our faces. I could see that Dennis was pining for his wife, so I arranged for Mary to fly in by a helicopter and join us for a holiday at Indigo Bay. On 1st October, we took off from Indigo Bay to Vilanculos. We would be able to clear customs for our flight back to SA. The weather forecast for this route was borderline for 2 private pilots with no instrument rating. We climbed above the clouds, maintaining ground visibility for this 3.5-hour flight to Joburg. After refueling and a quick bite at Kruger, we took off for our final leg back to Tetterfield Air Park in Johannesburg. En route to Tetterfield, my cousin met us in his pit special. This made for a grand entry, and I needed to do a flyby in this new aircraft, as there were some 80 people waiting for us with a barbecue and ice-cold beer. It was great to be home, but I can't wait to do this again in Skyleader's new 700 series.